Now, welcome to the November edition of What We're Planting and What We Are Sowing series. Now, November is an exciting time of the year. This is a time when all the plants that we started off in previous months are either about to take off or already taking off. So just to give you an update here in the garden, the tomatoes that we started off early in September, they adapted quite well. They are developing some fruit. I also had another volunteer tomato on this trellis that they are actually also in the fruiting stage. So I'm very excited about that. This bush beans that we started off in this growing bag, they are actually growing quite well. Last week we created a jungle garden, and it's quite surprising and interesting to see all the items that we actually sown are actually already emerging. We have some radishes that are already sprouting. Now for the November edition, we have quite a lot of things to cover. So let us walk over to the other side of the garden where we will be sowing and transplanting some of the crops that will create a thriving and a very productive summer garden. Now this month I've decided to convert a portion of my lawn into a pumpkin patch. I just use old cardboard to suppress the grass, and then I've just put some compost on top of the cardboard to actually create a beautiful bed for the pumpkin actually to thrive in. So I've already done this before, where I've converted a portion of my lawn into a garden. I'll put a link of that video if you're interested to see that. But now that I have actually converted this space, it is time for me actually to transplant this pumpkin variety that I will be growing this year. Now this is the first time that I'm actually growing the pumpkin. So the idea is just to plant 2 seeds, and I will allow the strongest seedling to actually grow. So you can stay tuned and see how this patch will be converted into a beautiful, thriving pumpkin patch. Now I've also been busy actually tidying up this bed where we have actually just recently harvested some of the broad beans. I've also managed to harvest some of the small onions that I've actually planted also during the winter garden period. I just decided that I think it's perfect time for me to clear up this space. I've also just decided to put some compost just to add some fertility to the section of the garden. Now that this area is ready, I will first transplant determinate tomato in this site. So it's important to know that you get determinate and indeterminate varieties. I'll put a link if you want to get more details on that. But the beauty with determinate varieties is that they are a bushy type, perfect for those gardeners with small space or those gardeners who are living in apartments. You can also grow this variety in a growing bag if you do not have sufficient space. I will just be transplanting this variety at the back of the raised bed. I will also just put some bone meal just for some calcium and also for some good root development. And now I've seen previous times or seasons that if you do not provide a structure for your determinate tomatoes, later on during the fruiting stage, you might encounter problems where your plant might fall over. So I have decided to make use of bamboo sticks just to provide some support to this tomato. So the idea is just to put one bamboo stick on one side, and then I'll put at the back some bamboo stick and put some twine and zip liners just to keep that steady. As the plant grows, I will just continue to put some support at the back and tie the tomato so that it can be nice and steady. Now next to the tomato, I'm also planning to plant some basil. Now basil is a great companion plant. It's not only good to keep the pest at bay, but basil is also known to actually improve the flavor and enhance the flavor of the tomato. So I will just also transplant the basil next to tomato just to implement some companion planting, and also just to protect tomato from pests, and also just to ensure that you enhance the flavor of the tomato. Now beside the basil, I've decided to try a new variety this year. This is a bush bean variety. It is called the African Premier. It is actually a broad bean. It's actually a beans origins from Kenya. So my plan is to actually grow these beans for dry beans. So my plan is just to space them approximately 5 centimeters apart. I will allow these beans to grow. Normally I will just grow runner beans for dry beans, but I thought let me experiment this year and also plant some of these bush bean varieties next in this bed. Now, following the beans, I will also be planting some Swiss chard. Now I've been told that this variety is actually tolerant for the warm temperatures that we are getting this time of the year. So it is very resilient leafy green that will provide also a long harvest. Now, beetroot is a staple in many South African gardens. So this month, I will also just be sowing next to the Swiss chard also a mix of beetroot. Like I indicated previously, that beetroot is one of those crops that you can start indoors and you can sow directly. Since the temperatures are nice and warm, I will just continue to sow this directly into the garden. Now, just to bring some beautiful color into the garden, I will be planting some marigold along the borders of this bed. So this will bring some color and also deter some pests. And I've also have some zinnias that I will be transplanting at the back of the tomatoes. Now, the zinnias are perfect for planting in the garden just to attract some bees and some butterflies, some pollinators that will actually be needed in the garden. So this will assist my pumpkin plant on this side and also for the rest of the garden. So I will be planting some zinnias at the back next to the tomato. And then I've also here marigold that I will be planting on the border of the garden. Now, as you can see on this side of the garden, we have here some green bell peppers that I've actually started off already planted last year, and I've overwintered them. This year I just thought let me experiment and prune them, but I can see they're adapting quite well. But this is also a perfect time if you want to plant some bell peppers to plant them in the. I think it was in September that we planted some broad runner beans around this structure. They are growing quite well. They are at the stage where they are flowering right now. So if you want to plant additional plants, warm season crop, runner beans will definitely be a good choice of crop to plant this time. Just make sure that you create a trellis or you have a trellis that you can grow it up against, because they are climbers. So for me, the easiest way was just to make use of these bamboo sticks to allow my runner beans actually to grow up. Now this year I'm also planning to start to try a new bean variety. I got this also from Living Seeds. So this is a beautiful bean. It's known to actually need to climb. So I will also just plant this next to this trellis. If you remember, this was the area where we have grown potatoes. We have harvested it. I will put a link up if you want to see the harvest from the winter planting. But just next to this trellis, I decided to plant some of these beans. Now I still have another trellis here that I will be using to transplant a tomato. So that is the Hain tomato variety. I think I started this off in June. I potted it on. And now is the perfect time for me to transplant it next to this trellis. So I will just be transplanting this tomato this side, and I will also just plant some basil next to this tomato to implement some companion planting. Now November is also a good time actually to transplant your sweet potato slips. So if you remember, I started the sweet potato slips. I saved them once I've harvested my sweet potatoes. They've been growing quite well in these containers. This year, I'm planning to actually grow them in a barrel. So I'm in the process of getting that sorted out. And I'll do a separate video when I'm transplanting these sweet potato slips into that container. But if you already have grown your sweet potato slips, now is a perfect time actually to transplant your slips. And because sweet potatoes, they are heat-loving crops, I've started this one. This is just to give you an example that I've started this in September, and it took approximately 2 months now for it just to start to develop actually some of the sprouts. So sweet potato is important to start it early, but luckily in South Africa we have a nice long growing season. So this is still a perfect time if you haven't started your sweet potato slips to develop them now. It can take a couple of weeks before your slips actually develop. But I found that this method is the easiest way because you will already have the roots at the bottom. I'll make a separate video when I transplant these sweet potato slips into the barrel. Now we still do have some crop from the winter garden that is still growing, like the onions. I have some brassicas that are also growing, but I must admit that the snails are attacking my plants like crazy. However, the onions are growing quite well. I'm looking forward to share that harvest in the upcoming weeks. But if you want to check the jungle garden that I've created last week, I'll put a link of that video up here. And if you want to see what we have done since we started in September in the series, I'll also put a link of the October and September videos on the site. But thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to see you in the future videos. Keep on sowing and growing.